I gave her my heart and my ring, and then she sold me to a church con man. When you're exploring coral thousands of miles offshore, the last thing you expect is to accidentally uncover your wife's double life. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I met Lauren in an aquarium gift shop. Like, how cheesy is that? Me with my marine biology textbooks tucked under my arm, bumping into this gorgeous blonde while reaching for the same overpriced plush turtle. Our hands touched, and damn it if that isn't the oldest cliche in the book. But sometimes life throws these stupid movie moments at you, and before you know it, you're living one. San Diego State University, junior year. I was buried in research about coral degradation patterns while she was finishing her business degree. We were basically from different planets, me with my head full of ocean acidification statistics and her planning marketing campaigns for local businesses. But something clicked. Maybe it was how she actually listened when I rambled about marine conservation. How she'd furrow her brow and ask these piercing questions nobody else bothered to think about. Or maybe it was just that she smelled like coconut sunscreen year-round, and it made me feel like I was always at the beach. Those early days were so pure? Is that the right word? We'd spend hours at Sunset Cliffs, me pointing out tide pool creatures while she sketched them in this little notebook she carried everywhere. She was actually pretty talented, could have been an artist if she'd wanted. But Lauren always said art didn't pay the bills. Looking back, that should have been my first clue about what really mattered to her. We dated through the rest of college. I proposed on the Hoya shores with this pathetic little ring I'd saved up for by taking extra research assistant hours. Lauren cried, and I thought it was because of the ring's size until she told me she'd never seen anything more perfect. That was my Lauren. At least, the Lauren I thought I knew. The one who didn't care about flashy things and loved me for my beautiful brain, as she used to say. After graduation, we moved into this tiny apartment in Ocean Beach. Everything smelled like salt and slightly moldy carpets, but it was OURS. Lauren got hired at this up-and-coming marketing firm downtown while I started my PhD program. Those first 2 years were, well, they were hard but good, you know? We were broke as hell. I'd spend 14 hours in the lab, come home to find Lauren asleep on the couch with her laptop still open, marketing proposals scattered everywhere. We'd eat ramen with fancy add-ins, an egg was splurging, and talk about our 5-year plan. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at Instagram influencers with their luxury vacations and designer clothes. She'd quickly close the app when she noticed me watching. Just market research, she'd say with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. I believed her because I wanted to. Because the alternative meant admitting that the woman I loved might want more than I could give her. And honestly, what guy wants to face that truth? My breakthrough came in year 3 of my doctorate. My research on coral symbiotic relationships caught the attention of the Scripps Institution. They offered me funding and resources that basically changed my life overnight. Suddenly, my stipend tripled. We could afford a better apartment, real food, even occasional weekends away. Lauren was thrilled, maybe too thrilled, looking back. She'd always been supportive, but something shifted when the money improved. She became invested in my success in a different way. The first thing she did was redecorate our apartment. Out went our secondhand furniture, and came stuff from places I'd never heard of with price tags that made my stomach hurt. We need to look successful to be successful, she'd insist when I questioned the spending. It's called fake it till you make it, babe. And yeah, the apartment looked amazing, but every time I sat on our new $2,000 couch, I felt like I was going to break it. Around this time, Lauren started getting involved with this local church group, the Radiant Light Community, or something equally pretentious. I didn't think much of it. She'd grown up religious, and I figured maybe the stress of her job was making her reconnect with that part of her life. I'm agnostic at best, but I supported her. If sitting in a building listening to some dude talk about eternal salvation made her happy, who was I to judge? I was spending my Sundays looking at coral polyps under microscopes anyway. It started with Sunday services, then Wednesday Bible study, then Friday community outreach events. Before I knew it, Lauren was at this church 3 to 4 times a week. She'd come home talking about their amazing charity work and this brilliant businessman named Stephen King, 54M, who was their main benefactor. Yes, like the author, which I joked about exactly once before realizing Lauren didn't find it funny at all. According to her, he was some real estate mogul who'd found God after a near-death experience and now devoted his fortune to worthy causes. The first time she brought me to church with her, I felt like I was walking into a bizarro business convention disguised as worship. Everyone was dressed in what I'd call subtle expensive, you know, Clothes that don't scream money, but definitely whisper it. The pastor talked more about prosperity gospel than anything Jesus actually said, and the PowerPoint presentation, yes, they had slides in church, had more graphs than Bible verses. And then there was Stephen King. Tall, tanned, 2 white teeth, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my annual stipend. He had this way of putting his hand on people's shoulders when he talked to them, men and women. That made my skin crawl. When Lauren introduced us, he gave me this once-over that felt like he was calculating my value. "So you're the brilliant scientist Lauren's always talking about," he said, still gripping my shoulder. "We should discuss your research sometime. I'm always looking for promising investment opportunities." I was working 70-hour weeks finishing my doctorate and starting postdoc research, so I barely registered the warning signs. Lauren buying new clothes for church. Lauren suddenly interested in my research grant details. Lauren texting constantly, then hiding her phone when I'd walk into the room. Classic stuff that any idiot should have caught. But I was that special kind of idiot, the educated kind who thinks he's too smart to be fooled. The real red flag should have been when Lauren started suggesting I invest some of my grant money with Stephen King's incredibly successful real estate ventures. "He's helping church members build wealth for God's kingdom," she'd say with this weird gleam in her eye. I deflected, saying the grant had specific usage requirements, but she kept bringing it up. Eventually, I caught her looking through my research contract one night while I was asleep. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just trying to understand my world better. What really kills me now is how she'd use my work schedule against me. "You're never home," she'd complain. "I get lonely. The church community sees me." And I'd feel this crushing guilt because, yeah, I was working all the time. Science doesn't stick to 9 to 5 hours. Sometimes coral spawns at midnight and you gotta be there. Sometimes sea urchins decide 4 a.m. is when they want to release gametes. I couldn't exactly tell the marine ecosystem to work around my marriage. So when Lauren started staying out later after church events, I didn't question it. When she'd come home smelling like unfamiliar cologne, I told myself it was probably just from hugging church members goodbye. When our intimacy dwindled to almost nothing, I blamed my own exhaustion and stress from the doctorate program. I created every possible explanation that wasn't the obvious one because I couldn't face what was happening right in front of me. Our 7th anniversary came around, and I had incredible news. I'd been selected for a 3-month research expedition to study coral systems in the South Pacific. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, but it meant being away for months. Lauren's reaction was mixed. She seemed genuinely happy for me, but immediately asked about the stipend and whether I'd need all of it while at sea. That should have been my second red flag. I remember the night before I left, we had this big dinner at home. Lauren actually cooked, which had become rare. She made my favorite, this spicy seafood pasta that she used to make when we were first married. We drank wine, reminisced about college days, and for a few hours, it felt like US again. She even initiated sex that night, the first time in months. In the morning, she drove me to the harbor, kissed me goodbye with tears in her eyes, and said she'd miss me every second. I actually left thinking maybe this expedition would be good for us, absence making the heart grow fonder and all that crap. I left for the expedition aboard the research vessel Genesis in high spirits. 12 marine biologists, 3 climate scientists, and a support crew of 15, all headed to the most pristine coral ecosystems left on Earth. I video called Lauren every few days when our satellite connection allowed. She always seemed to be at church events, always had to cut our calls short because Stephen needs me for this committee meeting, or we're planning a big community fundraiser. The Genesis was amazing, an 85-foot converted fishing vessel retrofitted for research. I shared a tiny cabin with one of the climate scientists, this brilliant guy named Tyler who snored like a chainsaw but had these incredible insights about ocean current shifts. During the day, we'd do dives, collect samples, run tests in the onboard lab. At night, we'd share meals in the galley, play cards, and talk about our findings. It was the most intellectually stimulating environment I'd ever been in. About 6 weeks into the expedition, our satellite system got an upgrade during a supply rendezvous. Suddenly, our internet was much faster, and I decided to surprise Lauren with a video call during her lunch break. She didn't answer. I tried again that evening. Nothing. Concerned, I emailed, texted, nothing for almost 2 days. Then a short text. Sorry, was on a spiritual retreat with the church. No phones allowed. Call tomorrow. Something felt off. I can't explain it, just this knot in my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her recent behavior, the financial questions, the obsession with Stephen King and his investment opportunities. Using my research credentials, I logged into our shared cloud account to check our joint calendar, thinking maybe she'd mark this retreat. What I found instead changed everything. There were photos, hundreds of them, Lauren and Stephen, at restaurants, at what looked like a cabin by a lake, in hotel rooms. Lauren wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. Selfies of them in bed together. The timestamps showed the affair had been going on for at least a year. Worse, I found a folder of financial documents. Stephen and Lauren had been researching my grant, my contracts, looking for ways to divert research funds into some blessed investment corporation that Stephen ran. There were even draft emails they'd planned to send from my account, authorizing fund transfers. They'd planned to clean me out while I was at sea. And then I found the spreadsheet. Their exit strategy. It detailed how Lauren would divorce me upon my return, claiming emotional neglect due to my work. She'd seek alimony based on my new higher income, plus half of all assets. Meanwhile, Stephen, who turned out to be separated but not divorced due to his religious convictions, would set her up in one of his properties until they could be together publicly. I vomited over the side of the ship that night. Then I got calculating. You know what's weird? In that moment, I didn't feel the rage or heartbreak you might expect. Instead, this strange calm came over me. Like my brain decided that emotions would just get in the way of what needed to be done. I felt like I was looking at one of my research specimens, observing a particularly fascinating example of parasitic behavior in a human host. Rather than confronting Lauren immediately, I documented everything. Downloaded all the evidence, took screenshots, recorded dates and times. I quietly contacted Scripps' financial department to set up additional verification requirements for any fund movements. I spoke to a lawyer friend via satellite call, describing my situation in hypothetical terms. For the next 2 weeks, I played the oblivious husband. Had cheerful video calls with Lauren, telling her how much I missed her, listening to her lies about church activities. All while watching her and Stephen drain my personal savings account, the only one she had access to, which I'd now left with just enough money to make them think it was working. God, those calls were surreal. I'd be sitting there in the ship's communication room, smiling and nodding as Lauren told me about a bake sale that never happened, asking her thoughtful questions about church outreach programs that she was making up on the spot. Meanwhile, I could literally see in another browser tab how she and Stephen had spent MY money on a weekend in Palm Springs at some luxury resort. The cognitive dissonance was so intense it almost felt like I was acting in a movie rather than living my actual life. During this time, I learned more about Stephen King. He wasn't the successful developer he claimed to be. He'd run multiple failed real estate schemes, been sued twice for fraud, and was using the church as a networking tool to find new victims. Lauren wasn't his first affair within the congregation either. The man was a predator in every sense, financial and otherwise. One particularly interesting detail, he'd been kicked out of 2 other churches in neighboring counties for similar behavior. Apparently, his MO was to find a new congregation, establish himself as a generous benefactor, identify vulnerable or greedy women, often married to successful men, seduce them, and use them to access their husbands' resources. Then, when things inevitably blew up, he'd move on to the next church community. The Radiant Light was just his latest hunting ground. I consulted with maritime lawyers, financial advisors, and even a digital security expert, all through careful satellite calls when I was supposed to be collecting samples. I systematically secured every asset I had, documented every conversation, and prepared for what would happen upon my return. Imogen, my research colleague, noticed something was off. We'd been friends since grad school. She was this brilliant coral geneticist who could identify species just by the sound they made at night. Yes, corals make sounds. Most people don't know that. One evening, she found me staring at my laptop, and I don't know if it was the look on my face or what, but she just said, "Adam, whatever it is, you can tell me." And for some reason, I did. Emma's reaction was pure righteous fury on my behalf. She offered to accidentally spill hydrochloric acid on Stephen's car when we got back. Joking, I think, but more importantly, she helped me think clearly. While the male part of my brain wanted nuclear revenge, Emma helped me see that the best revenge would be protecting myself and my career while letting their own actions expose them. 3 weeks before I was due back in San Diego, I executed my plan. First, I transferred all remaining funds from our joint accounts to my new secure accounts, leaving just enough to avoid overdraft fees. Then I sent an email to Lauren, Stephen, and the head pastor of their church. The email contained just 3 photos of them together, along with the message, "I know everything. Adam." Then I turned off my phone for 24 hours. When I turned it back on, there were 37 missed calls from Lauren, 5 from unknown numbers, likely Stephen, and 1 from the pastor. There were desperate texts, emails, voicemails, Lauren swinging wildly between denial, anger, tearful apologies, and vicious threats. One voicemail still haunts me. "Adam, please, you don't understand. Stephen and I have something real. Something godly. You've always put your stupid fish before me. Before us. I deserve happiness too. And yes, we looked at your accounts. But that was just to secure our future because you're so irresponsible with money. Please call me back. I love you. I hate you. Call me back." I sent one final message before cutting contact again. "I have everything. All the photos. All the financial plans. All the attempted fraud. I've secured all my assets and consulted lawyers. Don't be at our apartment when I return. You have 3 weeks." The head researcher on our expedition, Captain John Ramirez, 60M, noticed something was wrong. I'd always respected John. He was an old-school marine biologist who'd seen it all, both in the ocean and in human behavior. When he found me staring into the dark water one night, I ended up telling him everything. His advice was simple. The sea teaches us that everything returns to balance eventually. The predators get too greedy. The tide always turns. John had been through his own divorce decades earlier. His ex-wife had left him for his department chair while he was doing fieldwork in the Galapagos. "The thing about research scientists," he told me, "is that we're easy targets. We're so focused on our work that we miss what's happening right in front of us. But we're also survivors. We adapt. It's literally what we study." The remaining weeks at sea were strangely peaceful. I threw myself into the research, documenting the beautiful resilience of coral systems that had survived against all odds. There was this one reef we found that had been nearly destroyed by a crown-of-thorns starfish outbreak, but it was recovering in this unexpected way, adapting and evolving. Nature's reminder that destruction isn't always the end of the story. Emma was particularly supportive, staying up late to help analyze samples, bringing me coffee during early morning dives. We'd been friends throughout my academic career, but now I saw her compassion in a new light. She never pushed or pried, just offered quiet solidarity and occasionally made me laugh with her darkly weird scientist humor. "Relationships are like experimental trials," she'd say. "Sometimes you have to discard contaminated samples." When our vessel finally docked in San Diego, I half expected to see Lauren waiting, ready for a dramatic confrontation. Instead, there was just Emma, who'd flown back a week earlier, holding a sign that said, "Welcome back, survivor," with a little drawing of a coral reef. My apartment had been cleared out of Lauren's things. I later learned she'd moved in with her sister, not Stephen. The mighty real estate mogul had apparently ditched her the moment their scheme fell apart, proving once again that those who betray together don't stay together. The silence of the apartment was deafening that first night. I sat on that stupid expensive couch that Lauren had insisted we needed, drinking a beer and trying to process what my life had become. The walls still had shadows where her decorative mirrors and artwork had hung. The closet was half empty. The bathroom counter lacked her array of products. It was like living with a ghost. I could see the outline of where she'd been, but the substance was gone. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. Faced with the mountain of evidence I had, Lauren agreed to a settlement that required her to relinquish any claims to my research funds, future earnings, or property. The church quietly asked Stephen to worship elsewhere, though they never publicly acknowledged the scandal. I did learn something interesting from my lawyer. Apparently, I wasn't the first spouse to come forward about Stephen. There had been at least 2 previous settlements with other families, all sealed under confidentiality agreements. Stephen's MO was to cut and run when exposed, paying just enough to keep things quiet and preserve the possibility of finding new hunting grounds. A true predator, adaptable and calculating. I learned that Lauren and Stephen's financial situation collapsed quickly. The Blessed Investment Corporation turned out to be leveraged with massive debt, and once his reputation in the church community was damaged, other investors pulled out. Lauren found herself abandoned, her reputation in tatters, her secret plans exposed. 6 months after my return, I ran into Lauren at a coffee shop. I almost didn't recognize her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a retail uniform. She looked tired, older somehow. She tried to engage me in conversation, apologizing again, telling me she'd been under Steven's influence and had found true redemption now. I just ordered my coffee and walked away. There was nothing left to say, but as I was leaving, she called after me. He never loved me, you know. Once I couldn't get to your money, I was worthless to him. I didn't turn around, but those words stayed with me. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected all along, that their relationship had been transactional at its core. A business arrangement disguised as an affair. I sometimes wonder if I should feel more satisfaction about how things turned out for her. Maybe in movies, revenge feels sweet. In real life, it just feels empty. I don't want her to suffer. I just want her out of my life. The most surprising aftermath was the reaction from the academic community. Somehow, and I suspect Emma had something to do with this, word got around about what had happened, but framed as Pierce shows exceptional dedication to research despite personal challenges. Rather than being the subject of gossip, I became this weird example of professional commitment. The department chair even mentioned my remarkable focus during personal adversity in a faculty meeting. The Scripps Institution approved a new grant for my work, bigger than before, with a focus on how coral adaptations might help us understand climate resilience. I'm building a small house closer to the research center with a view of the ocean. Emma comes over often, initially to collaborate on research papers, but increasingly just to be together. She's brilliant, honest, and looks at the ocean with the same wonder I do. Whatever's growing between us is developing slowly, naturally, like a healthy reef. We're taking it slow, Emma and I. There's no rush. Sometimes we spend entire evenings just working side by side, not talking much but existing in this comfortable shared space. Other times, we have these intense conversations about ocean acoustics or genetic drift that somehow feel more intimate than any conversation I ever had with Lauren. Last week, she stayed over for the first time. We made breakfast together the next morning, and it felt so normal, so right, that it almost scared me. Last week, I received a package. Inside was my grandmother's ring, the one I'd given Lauren when I proposed. No note, just the ring in a small box. I took it to the end of the pier that evening and thought about throwing it into the ocean. Some symbolic gesture to finally close this chapter. But instead, I put it back in my pocket. Not because I'm holding on to the past, but because I've learned that value isn't always where you expect to find it. Sometimes it's in the things that survive the storm. There's this phenomenon in reef ecosystems called bleaching. When corals expel their symbiotic algae under stress, turning white and often dying. But some corals survive these bleaching events. They find new symbiotic partners, adapt to changing conditions, and rebuild. Marine biologists call it resilience capacity, this mysterious ability to endure catastrophe and regenerate. I think humans have that capacity too. We get stripped down to our core by betrayal or loss, left vulnerable and exposed. But then, somehow, we find new relationships, new purposes, new ways to exist in a changed environment. The ocean has always been my teacher. It shows us that life persists in the most hostile environments, that complex systems can be both fragile and incredibly resilient, that what looks like destruction is often just transformation. I don't think about Lauren much anymore. I think about the corals we're trying to save, about the papers Emma and I are writing, about the small garden I'm planting at my new house. Life moves in cycles, like the tide. It brings things in, and then it takes them away again, leaving something new in their place. As for faith, I still don't go to church, but I believe in something now that I didn't before. I believe in resilience, in adaptation, in the slow, persistent power of growth after destruction. And some days, when the sun hits the water just right, that feels like enough.